Husband chose a simple ring for his bride, who scoffed, "What would happen if the simplest gift hid the future you've always dreamed of?" Don't miss this video. A modest ring, a secret key, and a love story that defied appearances and transformed, lives in Sonoma Valley. What Robert and Maria built together will touch your soul. And believe me, the ending is much more surprising than you imagine. Subscribe to our channel now and join us in this story where true value isn't always visible at first glance. The sun was beginning to set behind the mountains of California, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Robert Mendoza watched the sunset from his small plot on the outskirts of Sonoma Valley, where time seemed to pass at a different rhythm. His hands, weathered by work, caressed a small velvet box that he carefully kept in his shirt pocket. Inside it, the fruit of months of sacrifice and work, a simple polished gold ring without grand ornaments or ostentatious stones. For almost a year, Robert had saved every dollar that his modest farm, Almond Grove, provided him. He had sold part of his avocado harvest, some cattle, and even old tools he no longer used. He wasn't a man of luxuries. His life had always been marked by simplicity and hard work, values inherited from his father and grandfather, men of the land forged by the sun and the seasons. What nobody knew, not even Maria Foster, the woman who had stolen his heart, was that the ring hid something more valuable than any diamond, a small secret compartment where a tiny key rested. That key represented the future that Robert had meticulously planned for both of them. Maria had arrived in Sonoma Valley 3 years ago, fleeing from the hustle and bustle of New York City. The granddaughter of one of the most renowned jewelers in the city, she had grown up among precious gems and fine metals. She had fallen in love with the tranquility of that wine country town, but had never managed to completely detach herself from certain luxuries she was accustomed to. "Are you sure it's enough, Robert?" The voice of Mrs. Carroll, his godmother and confidant, interrupted his thoughts as she served him a steaming cup of coffee. "For a sincere heart, godmother, this is more than enough," he replied, with a certainty that contrasted with the slight trembling of his hands. Mrs. Carroll took the small box and observed the ring carefully. "It's beautiful, son, but Maria, she comes from a different reality. Her friends from the city show off ostentatious jewels on their fingers." "I know," Robert sighed, "but this ring has a value that goes beyond what can be seen at first glance. I just hope she can understand it." That night, under the starry canopy of Sonoma, Robert prepared a simple dinner in the courtyard of his farm. Lantern lights dimly illuminated the table, while the sound of crickets composed the perfect soundtrack for the occasion. When Maria arrived, wearing a flowery dress that accentuated her slender figure and caramel skin, Robert's heart raced. The young dinner passed with laughter and anecdotes. Maria spoke enthusiastically about her small artisan shop in the historic center, which was beginning to attract foreign tourists. "You know, today a couple from Europe came by who were enchanted with my hand-woven scarves," she commented with a sparkle in her eyes. "They bought 3 pieces and told me that when they return to London, they'll recommend my shop to all their friends." Robert listened to her, captivated, admiring her passion and enthusiasm. When the moment came, he gathered his courage, took Maria's hand in his, and kneeling before her, took out the small velvet box. "Maria Foster, since you came into my life, everything has taken on a new meaning. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Maria's face lit up for an instant, but upon opening the box and seeing the ring, her expression subtly changed. A polite smile replaced her initial excitement, and a fleeting flash of disappointment crossed her gaze. However, she quickly composed herself. "Yes, Robert, I accept," she responded, extending her hand for him to place the ring on her finger. The golden metal shone timidly under the light of the lanterns. That night, as Robert drove her back to her house in town, he couldn't help but notice a certain distance in his fiancée. When saying goodbye with a kiss at the doorway, she looked at the ring on her finger again. "It's nice," she commented with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Simple, but nice." "Like our love," he replied, gently squeezing her hands. "Sometimes what's most valuable isn't what shines the brightest." In the following days, Maria's friends didn't take long to notice the new ring on her finger. At the cafe in the main square, Sofia Dominguez, her childhood friend, who had also moved from the city, examined the jewel with an indecipherable expression. "This is what Robert gave you?" she asked, not hiding her surprise. "I thought he would give you something more impressive. After all, everyone knows you're the granddaughter of Frederick Foster, the jeweler." "Robert is a simple man," Maria defended him, although a telling blush covered her cheeks. "He values other things." "Of course," intervened Lucy Torres, another friend who flaunted an engagement ring with a considerable diamond. "But darling, you deserve more. This ring doesn't even have a stone." Her friend's words remained etched in Maria's mind. That night, observing the ring in the light of her bedroom lamp, she couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. Robert was a good man, hard-working and honest, but didn't she deserve something that better reflected her worth? Doubts began to grow like shadows in her heart, while the wedding date inexorably approached on the calendar. The wedding preparations advanced among sighs and forced smiles. Maria had chosen a small chapel in the center of Sonoma Valley for the ceremony, decorated with bougainvillea and candles. While trying on her dress in Mrs. Hope's workshop, the best seamstress in town, she couldn't help but think about her friend's words over the last 3 months. "Are you sure you want to continue with this?" Sophia had asked her the previous week while they were having coffee in the square. "You're still in time to ask him for a different ring, or you could use some of your grandfather's jewelry for the ceremony." "I can't do that," Maria replied, although the idea had already crossed her mind more than once. Robert would feel hurt. "He'll get over it," Lucy insisted, joining the conversation. "Men always do. Besides, what will your parents say when they see such a simple ring? Your grandfather was one of the most prestigious jewelers in New York City." Those doubts tormented her while Mrs. Hope adjusted the last details of the dress. In the mirror was reflected a beautiful bride, but with a lost gaze. "You look gorgeous, sweetie," commented the elderly seamstress, "but your face doesn't show the joy a bride should have. Is something troubling you?" Maria shook her head, forcing a smile. "Just nerves, Mrs. Hope." The wedding day arrived with a splendid dawn over the colorful streets of Sonoma. Robert's small farm had been transformed for the occasion, with floral arrangements, lights, and a huge tent that gave shade to the tables arranged for the banquet. Family and friends from both sides gathered to celebrate the union. When Maria walked toward the altar on her father's arm, whispers of admiration filled the chapel. Robert waited for her with a gaze full of love and trembling hands. The ceremony was emotional and traditional, with readings about love and fidelity that moved those present. However, Maria couldn't help but notice the stares of some of her city friends fixed on her left hand, where the simple gold ring shone timidly. During the reception, between dances and toasts, doubts continued to haunt her heart. She watched Robert chatting animatedly with his farmer uncles, sharing laughs with his cousins and dancing with his mother. He was a good, hard-working, honest man, but so different from the world she was accustomed to. The honeymoon was simple. A week touring charming towns in the wine country, staying in rustic inns and enjoying local cuisine. While her friends showed off photos of exotic beaches on social media, Maria shared images of century-old churches, crafts, and natural landscapes. Beautiful, without doubt, but very different from what she had imagined for that special moment. Upon returning to Sonoma, married life began with a peaceful routine. Maria continued attending to her artisan shop in the center, while Robert worked tirelessly on the farm. They shared their nights in the main house of Almond Grove, a modest but cozy construction with thick adobe walls that kept the cool during hot days. One afternoon, while Maria was cleaning the jewelry she would wear for a dinner with friends, she noticed something strange about her engagement ring. Upon examining it more closely under the light, she discovered an almost imperceptible line that seemed to delineate a compartment. Intrigued, she used the tip of a pin to manipulate that small indentation. After several attempts, she managed to open what turned out to be a tiny hidden space. Inside, wrapped in a small piece of red velvet, rested a miniature key. "What is this?" she murmured to herself, confused and surprised. When Robert returned from the fields that night, Maria was waiting for him on the porch with the ring and the small key in her extended palm. "What does this mean?" she asked directly, showing him her discovery. Robert smiled, a serene and mysterious smile she had never seen before. "I was waiting for you," he simply replied. "Follow me." He took her hand and led her through the avocado orchards until they reached a remote area of the property that Maria had never visited. There, among leafy trees, stood a construction covered by tarps. "Before I show you this," said Robert, stopping, "I want you to know that I understand your doubts about us. I know you expected more, that perhaps I disappointed you with such a simple ring and a life so different from what you knew." Maria lowered her gaze, embarrassed to see her most intimate thoughts exposed. "But I also want you to know," he continued, "that from the first day I saw you, I've been working to build something special. Not something that shines on the outside, but something that will last forever." With a decisive gesture, Robert removed the tarps, revealing a beautiful colonial-style house, small but elegant, with walls in a soft ochre color and large windows that reflected the sunset. An incipient garden surrounded the construction, with newly planted roses and a stone path leading to the main entrance. "This is Jasmine House," explained Robert as he guided Maria to the door. "I've been building it for the last 2 years, with the help of my uncle Jack, who is a master builder. Every detail, every corner I thought of for you." Maria remained silent, assimilating what she was seeing. When they reached the door, Robert pointed to the lock. "That small key you found doesn't open this door," he explained. "It opens something more valuable." He led her inside the house, where empty rooms waited to be furnished and decorated. In the main room, on a carved wooden shelf, rested an antique wooden chest. Robert took the tiny key from Maria's hand and inserted it into the chest's lock. With a soft click, the lid opened. Inside were legal documents certifying the ownership of that house and 5 acres of fertile land in both their names. Next to the papers, an envelope contained photographs of what that place had been before, an arid and abandoned plot that Robert had transformed with his own hands into a blooming garden. "Why didn't you tell me anything?" asked Maria with a trembling voice as silent tears rolled down her cheeks. "I wanted it to be a surprise," he responded softly, "and I also wanted to be sure that you chose me, not what I could offer you." In that moment, as if a veil had been drawn back from her eyes, Maria saw for the first time the true value of what she had. It wasn't a ring with diamonds or an ostentatious wedding that defined the love Robert professed for her, but every drop of sweat shed to build a future together, every dawn working the land thinking of her, every decision made with the heart. The following months were of adaptation and discovery for Maria. She learned to value the slow pace of country life, to recognize the different bird songs at dawn, and to enjoy the taste of freshly harvested fruits. Jasmine House, as Robert had named it, gradually filled with artisanal furniture and objects with history. Some pieces came from Robert's family, others were treasures found in Sonoma's antique markets, and several had been created by local artisans who frequented Maria's shop. Her perspective on life and what really matters was subtly changing. When her friends from the city visited her, she no longer felt that pang of shame when showing them her home or her ring. Now she proudly spoke of the projects she shared with Robert, the expansion of the orchard, the construction of a small greenhouse for medicinal plants, the plans to raise heritage chickens. However, life is never free from trials. One October afternoon, while Maria was attending to her shop in the center, she received a visit from Edward Valmont, a businessman from Santa Rosa with whom she had coincided at several artisan events. "Maria, what a pleasure to see you," he greeted effusively. "I've come to Sonoma on a matter that might interest you enormously." The man explained that he represented a group of investors who were planning to build a luxurious tourist complex on the outskirts of Sonoma. Angel View Resort, they called it. An ambitious project that would include a boutique hotel, spa, gourmet restaurants, and luxury villas for wealthy foreigners. The ideal land for the main entrance of the complex is precisely the area where your husband's property is located, explained Edward, extending an elegant folder with renders and financial projections. "We are offering very generous sums to all the owners in the area." Maria observed the digital images, modern and elegant structures that dramatically contrasted with the rustic simplicity of Almond Grove. The figures Edward mentioned were extraordinary, enough to buy a luxurious house in the best area of Sonoma and have capital to significantly expand her artisan business. Think about it, he continued. You could open a boutique in New York City, even abroad. With your good taste and your contacts with artisans, it would be a resounding success. That night, Maria shared the proposal with Robert. To her surprise, her husband didn't reject it immediately. "If it's what you desire, we can consider it," he said as they dined on the porch under the starry sky. "The money would allow us to start anew somewhere else, perhaps closer to the center." "Wouldn't you mind leaving all this?" she asked, genuinely surprised. "You've worked so hard on these lands." Robert took her hand on the table, gently caressing the ring that symbolized their union. "What I built here I did for us, not for the land itself," he replied serenely. "If your happiness is elsewhere, we can transplant our roots." That night, Maria couldn't fall asleep. She quietly got up and went out to walk the moonlit paths. She reached Jasmine House and sat on the small garden bench, contemplating the silhouette of the home Robert had built for her with so much love. She remembered the initial disappointment upon seeing the simple ring, the commiserating looks of her friends, the shame she had felt. And then she remembered the moment she discovered the true meaning behind that simple gold band. It wasn't the metal that mattered, but the promise it contained, the future it represented, the deep and honest love that had inspired it. Was she about to make the same mistake again, valuing external shine more than true essence? Several neighbors had already accepted the investor's offers. Mr. Anderson, the old man who grew the best strawberries in the region, had sold his plot and moved with his daughter to Sacramento. The Ortega family, owners of a small artisanal cheese dairy, had also yielded their lands in exchange for a considerable sum. The landscape she had come to love was beginning to transform. Heavy machinery, fenced properties, private property signs where there used to be neighborhood paths. The following week, Edward Valmont returned to the shop with preliminary documents and an advance check. The businessman spoke enthusiastically about the benefits the resort would bring to Sonoma: jobs, high-level tourism, international projection. "It's a unique opportunity," he insisted. "Once the complex is operational, the value of surrounding properties will multiply. Whoever doesn't sell now will regret it later." But something had changed in Maria. As she listened to the businessman, her gaze fell on a scarf being woven by Mrs. Grace, an elderly artisan from the mountains who supplied her with exclusive pieces. Each thread, each knot, each color had a meaning and a story. It wasn't just a beautiful garment, it was the result of generations transmitting knowledge, a tradition, a way of understanding the world. "I'm sorry, Edward," she finally said, returning the unsigned documents. "We won't be selling." The decision took the businessman by surprise, who insisted by increasing the offer by 30%. But Maria remained firm. That night, when she communicated her decision to Robert, she expected to encounter resistance or at least surprise. Instead, he smiled with that serene expression she had learned to love. "Are you sure?" he simply asked. "It's a lot of money." "There are things that don't have a price," she responded, intertwining her fingers with his. "You've taught me to see them." The following months weren't easy. The Angel View project faced complications, protests from environmental groups, irregularities in permits, conflicts among investors. Finally, after a year of interrupted works and scandals in the local press, the ambitious complex was abandoned. The sold lands were left in a legal limbo. Some plots were bought back by their original owners at much lower prices. Others remained barren, with half-built structures like scars on the landscape. Meanwhile, Almond Grove and Jasmine House flourished. Maria had expanded her shop to include a workshop where local artisans taught classes to tourists interested in traditional techniques. Robert, inspired by the growing interest in organic products, had converted part of his crops into an agroecological garden that supplied several restaurants in Sonoma. The most significant change came 3 years later, when a prestigious sustainable tourism magazine published an extensive report on Almond Grove, Sonoma's rural paradise. The photographs showed the exuberant orchards, Jasmine House surrounded by flowers, and Maria and Robert sharing their lifestyle with visitors, seeking to reconnect with nature and authentic traditions. Soon they began to receive requests from people who wanted to stay to experience life in the American countryside. Almost without planning it, they found themselves transforming an old barn into guest rooms and organizing workshops on traditional cooking, sustainable agriculture, and local crafts. What had begun as a personal project became a model admired and replicated in other regions. Maria and Robert were invited to share their experience in forums on rural tourism and cultural preservation. Their story inspired others to value the authentic, the simple, the true. One afternoon, while contemplating the sunset, from the porch of their house, Robert noticed that Maria was playing with her wedding ring, gently turning it on her finger. "What are you thinking about?" he asked with curiosity. "About how I almost let all this escape by not knowing how to look beyond the obvious," she replied with a smile. "About how a simple gold ring hid more value than all the jewels I ever desired." Robert kissed her hand tenderly. "Sometimes we need time to learn to see with the heart." A group of guests was approaching along the path, ready for the traditional cooking class that Maria would teach that night. Amid laughter and animated conversations, they headed toward the outdoor kitchen, where fresh ingredients and clay utensils waited to be transformed into a feast of authentic flavors. As Maria explained the cultural importance of each dish, her gaze met Robert's, who was observing her from the door. In that silent exchange, there was more richness than in all the treasures of the world. Complicity, respect, gratitude, and a love that, like fine wine, had become deeper and more complex with the passage of time. True fortune, Maria understood, wasn't in what they possessed, but in what they had built together. Not in the external shine of things, but in the invisible value that only the eyes of the heart can appreciate. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Robert and Maria has moved you as much as it has moved us. This tale reminds us that the true value of things isn't always in their appearance, but in the deep meaning they hide. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about true love and the decisions that mark our lives. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring unique tales that explore the complexity of the human heart and the choices that define our path. Have you ever discovered that what was truly valuable was hidden before your eyes? Or perhaps, like Maria, did you have to learn to see with your heart to find true happiness? We await you in the comments to share your experiences. Remember, sometimes the greatest treasures come in the simplest packages.